Don't you love the innocence of childhood and inquiring minds? Last week, my 4-year-old patient took my stethoscope and asked, "Doctor, what is this for?" And I said, "Simon, that is for me to listen to your heart." So he said to me, "Why do you need to listen to my heart?" And I said, "I need to listen to your heart to make sure that it's beating properly." And he said, "Why must you make sure that my heart is beating?" And I said, "Because I'm a doctor." And he said, "What is a doctor?" So I said, "A doctor is someone who keeps people alive." And I was obviously getting quite irritated by now. And he asked, "But why must you keep people alive?" And there was long, awkward, deathly silence, because he'd stumped me, and eventually I told him to go and ride his bicycle. I've spent most of my life and career right here in Cape Town, our beautiful mother city. And if you do stay longer in our city, beyond the extent of this conference, please get in touch. I'd be happy to show you the secrets, especially that of the natural world. So I studied medicine at the big academic hospital, WFRtDS, which you'll see as you drive down the road in what's called Hospital Bend on the way to the airport. And at WFRtDS is the famous World's Heart Transplant Museum, where Chris Barnard, a young, rather arrogant surgeon, performed a transplant on the 3rd of December 1967. The irony is that, in my opinion, that heart transplant was the first form of euthanasia. When Denise Darrell was killed in a car accident and declared brain dead, her heart was beating beautifully. And Dr. Barnard, it could be argued, removed the pump from one life and kindly transformed it to another. Our country is also plagued by human rights atrocities. And one of those, in my opinion, was allowing our hero, and arguably the most reformer of human rights in the world, our Madiba, to a dignified death. Our colleagues in one military hospital in Pretoria ironically kept Papa Nelson Mandela alive much longer than he surely would have wished for, and tortured our hero. So after qualifying as a doctor in South Africa, you have to spend a year doing what is called community service, where you work in rural and less resourced areas. And I was, as a bright-eyed, eager doctor to save lives, sent to a Catholic missionary hospital in the Drakensberg. The Drakensberg is the mountain range on the east coast of South Africa, and the scenery outside is pristine. The scenery inside is not. The South African public service is drowning with lack of human and physical resources, with lack of bed space, and the burden of trauma, tuberculosis, HIV, cancer, and other infectious diseases. Working conditions for nurses, psychologists, social workers, doctor alike are rife. In 1996, South Africa legalized abortion to mothers in their first trimester of pregnancy. Doctors have the right to refuse to perform an abortion. And as a very inexperienced young clinician, I was the only one in a 100 square kilometer radius willing to perform such abortions. I was soon ostracized by the Catholic nurse and nun community in the little area I was working with, and called Dr. Death. So even though one thing is for certain, as Professor has explained earlier, we're all going to die. As an anaesthetist, this became the ultimate failure, ironically. Spending most of my career thus far with patients on life support machines, death became something to fear. I pursued a career in anesthetics and intensive care, performing CPR and resuscitation and saving lives, often against the patients wishes and the wishes of their family. I was dictated to do so by the Hippocratic Oath and the Health Professions Council of South Africa and our current ethical laws. So what did I do? I immigrated and went to the United Kingdom, thinking life would be better there. Let me paint a scenario of 2 o'clock in the morning in a hospital currently at the NHLS. Your bleep screams at you. It goes, code blue, ward 16, bed 3. So you grab your defibrillator and I run frantically around passages of digitally cleaning graveyard workers. And in the UK, all young doctors are taught to treat every patient like you treat the Queen. I'm not sure how the Queen would like to be treated at the end of her life, but the assumption is that you keep her alive at all costs. So I arrive at an octogenarian ward, which smells of yesterday's vomited breakfast and old urine. And a kyphotic 85-year-old who broke her hip and hasn't left the hospital in 3 weeks is surrounded by anxious interns and nurses running around frantically, pouring ampules of whoever knows what into her fizzled veins. She is cold, blue, and cognitively left the planet a while ago. But there is protocol and action needs to be taken. The anaesthetist takes the airways and starts bagging. The young strapping intern jumps on the poor old duck's non-existent breasts, and there's the whipping sound of cracked ribs, which means he's been trained very well. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, breathe, breathe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, breathe, breathe. For 10 minutes, we thrash the old corpse to pieces. And 10 minutes later, by sad reality, there is no pulse. And the team suddenly admits defeat and the dreaded task of filling in pages and pages of certificates and reports about our failure loom. I leave the ward exhausted, clad with blood and sputum-soiled gloves and my apron. And there in the adjacent bed is another granny, and she's been sitting on a commode having witnessed the whole saga. And with eyes popping out, she smiles at me and said, "Doctor, thank you so much. I finally had a stool." So from a physician's point of view, what is death? Well, unfortunately, that's not black and white either. Clinically and physiologically, there's a gray area between life and death. The gray area in tissue death is what we clinically call the watershed area, and that's when necrosis hits in. Necrosis is the premature death of cells and tissues. Now, there is no debate that when a diabetic patient comes into a doctor's room with a necrotic toe, it is an emergency to remove that toe. And the quicker that toe is removed and put into the dustbin, the quicker the human's life will be saved. No amount of prayer or second opinion can refute the fact that that toe must be removed, and death will ensue the whole body, first proximally to the foot, and then the lower limb will need to be amputated. But there is another form of death which happens every single day in your body, and this is called apoptosis, or programmed cell death. If you feel in your mouth, feel your tongue, that's not your tongue that you were born with. Your original tongue is long dead. We are constantly undergoing tissue neogenesis and tissue autolysis, or apoptosis, or programmed cell death. And without this amazing ability of every human cell to commit suicide on an ongoing basis and create new cells, you would look and feel much older than you really are now. So death in our bodies is happening every moment. It's just a matter of whether it's unnatural cell death or natural cell suicide. And ironically, without cell suicide, we would not exist. Then there comes the issue of the two different types of declarations of death. When it comes to declaring death in intensive care, we've got brain death and cardiac death. brain death is declared after performing a battery of bedside tests, and someone can be brain dead, but their organs kept alive and in pristine condition for many years. If that was your relative, would you consider them dead or alive? Cardiac death, on the contrary, is the end of sustainable tissue viability. Once your heart is gone, everything is gone. So my question is pain and suffering arguably perceived to the greatest extent in the brain, not the heart? Then would it be by hypothesis that we could take someone's suffering away by euthanizing their brain, but not their heart and their whole body? And that's where I come to the idea of organ donation and harvesting. It's a very fulfilling and exciting prospect in the world at the moment. With one consenting organ donor, one brain-dead patient can valuably give quality of life to up to 8 people through lungs, hearts, corneas, kidneys, pancreas. Wouldn't it be fantastic if a family of a patient who is experiencing too much pain or suffering to live, instead of receiving the traumatic news that that loved one has somehow managed to take their own life, could instead give the gift in a loving, controlled manner and give life to others? Euthanasia, it seems, is plagued but with a matter of semantics, with dark, negative words such as suicide, killing, assisted suicide, merciful release, quietus. I think it's time, perhaps, that we fear death less and instead focus on the renewal of life. And so, in conclusion, I'd like to take the opportunity to share with you my personal story. One of a daughter and not of a doctor. This is my mum, and that is me when I was born. Mum was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2008, and on this very day, exactly 10 years ago, serendipitously, on the 10th of September 2008, through the valuable help of family and a GP friend, she rested in peace without as much pain and suffering as she would have had to endure. I would hope that in the future I can be involved to ensure that more people can have the gratitude that I've had to bring life to an end with positivity. Thank you so much.